The evacuation sirens screamed through the corridors of Station Nexus 7, their sharp wailing bouncing off metal walls and drilling into the skulls of every being present. Emergency lights painted everything in angry red, casting long shadows that danced with each flicker. Commander Vexthrol stood at the central control hub, his four eyes blinking in rapid succession as he processed the incoming data streams. The asteroid swarm was approaching faster than their initial calculations had predicted. They had perhaps 40 standard minutes before the first wave of debris would begin tearing through the station's outer hull. The Valori commander was known throughout the Galactic Council for his calm demeanor during crisis situations. He had successfully evacuated 3 stations during his career, saving thousands of lives without losing a single soul. Today would be no different. His tentacles moved across the control panel with practiced precision as he activated the station-wide communication system. All residents of Station Nexus 7, this is Commander Vexthrol speaking. We are initiating Emergency Evacuation Protocol 7. All personnel are to proceed immediately to the evacuation base. Leave all personal belongings behind. Your lives are the priority. Evacuation shuttles will depart in 30 standard minutes. The station housed approximately 12,000 beings from various species across the galaxy. Valori, Kethrani, the insectoid Krix, and several other species began streaming toward the evacuation bays in orderly lines. The protocols were working perfectly. Vexthrol allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched the population density indicators drop across the station's residential sectors. Then he noticed an anomaly in Sector 12, the human residential zone. The population indicators there had barely moved at all. Vexthrol felt his throat sacs tighten with confusion. The humans made up roughly 800 of the station's residents. They were a relatively new species to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the past century. They were strange creatures, to be sure, but Vexthrol had never known them to be stupid. Yet their sector showed almost no movement toward the evacuation points. He dispatched a security team to investigate. What they reported back made absolutely no sense. Commander, the humans are refusing to evacuate. Refusing? On what grounds? Vexthrol demanded, his voice carrying notes of disbelief that his translators struggled to convey properly. They claim they cannot leave without their companions, sir. They are gathering animals. Predatory animals. Vexthrol felt his blood run cold. He had read the cultural briefings on humans, of course. Every commander was required to familiarize themselves with the customs of species under their care. But he had dismissed certain sections as translation errors or exaggeration. Surely no intelligent species would willingly share their living quarters with carnivorous beasts. The security footage that appeared on his display told a different story entirely. Humans were indeed gathering in their residential corridors, but they were not empty-handed. They carried containers of various sizes, and within those containers were creatures that made Vexthrol's survival instincts scream in terror. He recognized some from the biological databases. The four-legged hunters with retractable claws that his species called small death in their native tongue. The larger quadrupeds with rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh, their powerful jaws capable of crushing bone. The humans called them cats and dogs. One human female was holding a glass container filled with water, inside which swam a creature with streamlined body and exposed teeth. Another human male had a serpent wrapped around his shoulders, its forked tongue tasting the air. There were feathered raptors sitting on human arms, their curved beaks and talons clearly evolved for killing. The humans were not leaving these creatures behind. They were preparing to bring them along. Vexthrol dispatched himself to Sector 12 personally. He could not comprehend what he was seeing through camera feeds alone. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding, some cultural context he was missing. As he arrived at the gathering point, the reality of the situation struck him with full force. The corridor was filled with hundreds of humans, all clutching various predatory species to their chests, as though the creatures were their own offspring. The noise was overwhelming. The small death creatures made high-pitched vocalizations. The larger ones produced deep barking sounds that resonated in Vex Thrul's chest cavity. Birds screeched. Somewhere in the crowd, something hissed. A tall human male approached him. Vex Thrul recognized him as Marcus Chun, one of the human community leaders on the station. He carried a small death creature in his arms, an orange and white specimen that stared at Vex Thrul with eyes that seemed to judge him and find him wanting. "Commander, we've received the evacuation orders, and we're ready to go," Marcus said calmly. "But we need assurance that our pets will be allowed on the evacuation shuttles." "That is impossible," Vex Thrul replied immediately. "Standard evacuation protocols prohibit the transport of live animals during emergency procedures. They pose risks to other evacuees. They take up space needed for sapient beings. They cannot be accommodated." Marcus's expression changed in a way Vex Thrul had learned to recognize. The human was becoming upset. His jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed slightly. "Commander, with respect, we're not leaving without them. You would die for animals?" Vex Thrul could not keep the incredulity from his voice. "These aren't just animals," Marcus said, and his tone carried something Vex Thrul couldn't quite identify. "They're family." The small death creature in his arms made a rumbling sound deep in its chest. Vex Thrul flinched backward before he could stop himself. The creature was clearly preparing to attack. But Marcus simply stroked its head, and the beast settled back against his chest contentedly. "I've had Oliver for 15 years, Marcus continued, gesturing to the creature. "He's been with me through 3 failed relationships, the death of my mother, and 12 different postings across the galaxy. He sleeps at my feet every night. He knows when I'm sad before I know it myself. When I was hospitalized with Venusian fever, he refused to eat until they let him visit me. I'm not leaving him to die in the vacuum of space. I would rather die myself." Similar sentiments rippled through the gathered humans. A young woman held a spotted canine close to her body, tears streaming down her face as she whispered to it. An elderly man had a birdcage secured to a wheeled cart, inside which 3 small predatory birds hopped from perch to perch. A child of perhaps 10 standard years clutched a serpent that was longer than she was tall, her face set with determination that seemed impossibly adult. Vex Thrul tried to explain the mathematics of the situation. The evacuation shuttles have finite capacity. Every container of predator beasts they brought meant fewer resources for actual people. The atmospheric requirements of some species might conflict with what the creatures needed. The presence of predators might trigger panic responses in prey species evacuees. The humans listened politely. Then they refused again. 25 minutes remained before the first impacts. Vex Thrul contacted the shuttle bay commanders and explained the situation. Their responses ranged from confused to horrified. Captain Yelmora of the Kethrani vessel flat out refused to allow predators aboard her shuttle. She would not risk her passengers' lives by introducing creatures that might attack them during transit. The Crick shuttle commander offered a compromise. Humans could evacuate, but animals must be contained in cargo holds with no life support. The humans rejected this immediately. Commander Vex Thrul found himself in an impossible situation. He could not force the humans to evacuate against their will. Galactic law protected sapient beings' right to make decisions about their own survival. If they chose to die with their predator companions, that was legally their choice to make. But everything in Vex Thrul's being rebelled against the idea of letting 800 people die for such an absurd reason. At 18 minutes to impact, something unexpected happened. A group of Valori evacuees approached the human gathering. At their head was a young female named Thryxal, one of the station's environmental technicians. She carried a communication tablet displaying a petition. "Commander," she said, "we wish to share our evacuation shuttle with the humans and their companions." Vex Thrul's eyes all widened simultaneously. You understand what you are asking. Those creatures are predators. They could attack you during transit. I have worked beside humans for 3 years, Threixel replied calmly. I have visited their quarters. I have met their companions. The small deaths do not hunt those who are family to their humans. The large ones protect rather than attack. I was frightened at first, as all our people are. But I have watched these creatures. They form bonds of loyalty that are almost Valori in their intensity. To abandon them would be to abandon family. We understand family. More evacuees joined her. A Crix worker named Clickvex signed that he would share his shuttle space as well. His human colleagues had shown him their companions before, and while the experience had been terrifying, he had come to understand that the bond between them was genuine. Word spread through the evacuation bays. Not all species were comfortable with the arrangement, but enough were willing that a plan began to form. At 12 minutes to impact, the first shuttles launched. They carried prey species who could not bear to share space with predators. No one blamed them. Survival instincts were hard to overcome. At 8 minutes to impact, the human evacuation began. They filed onto shuttles in orderly lines, their companions secured in carriers or held close to their bodies. The other species who had volunteered to share space watched with mixtures of fear and fascination as the predators were brought aboard. Vexthrol found himself standing at the entrance to one shuttle, watching as a human child carried her serpent past a row of terrified Valori passengers. The serpent raised its head, tongue flickering, and a Valori made a sound of distress. The child stopped and looked at the adult alien with serious eyes. Her name is Noodle, the child said. She's scared too. Loud noises frighten her. She won't hurt anyone. She just wants to be safe, like all of us. The Valori stared at the serpent. The serpent stared back. Then, slowly, the predator lowered its head and coiled more tightly around the child's arm, as though seeking comfort. It is afraid, the Valori whispered in wonder. Of course she is, the child replied. She doesn't understand what's happening. I have to be brave for her. The last shuttle launched with 4 minutes to spare. Commander Vexthrol watched from the command shuttle as the first asteroids began striking Nexus 7's outer sections. The station they had called home for years came apart in a silent cascade of debris and escaping atmosphere. But all 12,437 souls had escaped safely, along with approximately 1,000 predatory organisms that had no business being considered family by any rational species in the galaxy. In the days that followed, as the refugee fleet made its way to the nearest habitable station, something remarkable happened. The barriers between species began breaking down. Humans introduced their companions to curious aliens who had overcome their initial fear. Children of multiple species gathered to watch feeding times. A Crix scientist began documenting the bonds between humans and their predators, theorizing that the behavior might explain humanity's rapid social evolution. Commander Vexthrol found himself in the human section one evening, watching Marcus Chun brush the small death creature called Oliver. The beast purred with contentment, its eyes half closed in pleasure. I still do not understand, Vexthrol admitted. These creatures give nothing in return. They cannot work. They do not contribute to your survival. Why do you love them so? Marcus smiled. That strange expression that humans made when they found something both amusing and sad. Commander, not everything has to have a purpose. Sometimes you love something simply because it exists, and because it loves you back in whatever way it can. Oliver doesn't need to contribute anything. His existence makes my existence better. That's enough. The small death creature opened one eye and looked at Vexthrol. Then it made the rumbling sound again. This time, Vexthrol did not flinch. Perhaps, the commander said slowly, I am beginning to understand. He filed his report to the Galactic Council that night. In it, he recommended that Emergency Evacuation Protocol 7 be amended to include provisions for companion animals when human populations were involved. He noted that the humans' refusal to abandon their predators had actually improved morale among the evacuees rather than damaging it. He theorized that the bond between humans and their companions might be a psychological necessity rather than a cultural oddity. The council's response came 3 days later. They approved his recommendations with a note of confusion and a request for further study. They also asked him to explain why his report referred to predatory hunting cats as small deaths. Vex Thrall looked at Oliver, who had claimed a spot on his desk and refused to leave. The creature purred. "Some things," the commander said to himself, "are simply lost in translation."